Hey guys, welcome to the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Before we begin today's episode, I want to gently let you know that we will be discussing some very sensitive topics, specifically abortion and the emotional, spiritual, and personal pain that can follow. If you have little ones nearby or you're listening in a shared space, this may be an episode you want to come back to when you're alone, or you can put in some earbuds. Today's episode is sacred. It's personal. It's one I've prayed over for years, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I'd ever be ready to share what you're about to hear. But this conversation reminded me that when God brings healing, He also brings the courage to speak. This is part one of a powerful two-part series on a topic that is often met with silence: abortion. My guest today is Pat Layton, the author of Surrendering the Secret, a post-abortion recovery Bible study that has helped thousands of women step into healing and freedom. She's a speaker, leader, and someone who deeply understands the emotional and spiritual layers of this journey. In this first part, Pat shares her story, and for the first time publicly, I share mine. We talk about the weight of shame, the lie of secrecy, and the moment when healing finally began for both of us. Whether abortion is part of your story or the story of someone you love, my prayer is that this episode will feel like an invitation to grace and freedom. And I hope you'll come back next week for part two, where we will talk about how to take the steps towards healing, how to support others with compassion, and the scriptures that have carried us through. Let's dive in. Here's part one of my conversation with Pat Layton. Guys, welcome back to the show. Today's guest is one that I have been longing to chat with you, Pat, for many years, for many reasons. And we finally got to meet in person just in November, and it was such a precious time. And now we've developed this friendship. We have a love of Jesus. We have a love of goats. We have a love of creative work, all the things. So welcome to the Mom Show, Miss Pat Layton.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here, and I love being a mom. So I love your show and your newsletters and e-letters. I follow it.
You're sweet. You're sweet. Pat, this season I'm doing help. I'm a mom who, and I'm letting my guests fill in that blank. And so, would you fill in that blank for us?
Yes, I would say I am a mom who has been redeemed from so much pain and loss that it's a great passion of mine to show that transparency to my kids and help
Hmm.
them through their journeys, which we know they all have. But
Yeah.
I am a mom who is redeemed and set free, and I love sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you do it so well. Let's talk about how you got to the point, though, Pat, where redemption was your story and sharing that redemption was your story. Let's go back to the beginning of the hard before we got to the healing.
Yeah, and it's funny as you're saying that, I'm realizing that hard had to do with being a mom, right?
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
I was my first experience with motherhood was as a teenage girl. I gave birth to my oldest son just before my 18th birthday. I was a runaway bride of sorts. I ran away and got married to my high school sweetheart at 16. We gave birth to my son just before 18, and he left a little note on my kitchen table just a few months after our son was born and disappeared into the night. So
Mm.
I never saw him again, and my son never saw his birth father again. So I started out as a very young mom, but very passionate. I loved and adored him. I felt
Mhm.
very lost as a teenage mom, as you might imagine, and really survived with the help of my own parents. So I went back to college when he was very little, and I was already a single mom. And that's where I met my husband, who we are almost ready to celebrate 50 years of marriage, which is a
Wow.
miracle with our story. I became pregnant while we were in college, and I was very liberal, very pro choice, very adamant about a woman's right to choose abortion because of my own abandonment as a teenage mom. Now, I wasn't sorry I was a mom, but I was abandoned as a teenage mom with no job, no school, no career. I was very adamant about a woman's right to choose when she wanted to be a mom through abortion. So when I discovered I was pregnant with my newfound love in college, I decided to have an abortion. And it was such a head decision. It was like so logical to me. First of all, I didn't trust husbands to stay.
Yeah.
And secondly, I just was on path for my own career in the insurance business. That was my dream. I wanted to have my own business, and I had a dream of the sports car and the stiletto heels and all of that independence. So when I discovered I was pregnant, it seemed to be a very logical decision. But instead, I made a choice for abortion. I never gave my husband an option. I just said, this is what I'm doing. This is why, moving right along. And with abortion at that time being such a new legal battle, he was a deer in the headlights kind of position. Do I
Mhm.
even have a right to tell her what to do? And this is not my body, it's her body.
Mhm.
And so he was very silent during the decision-making process, but it turned out to be a very traumatic experience. I won't go into all the details for time here, but just to make it short, I had an allergic reaction to the anesthesia that they used to put me to sleep for the abortion, the safe and legal abortion that I had fought so hard to get. And so I had an allergic reaction. I had to be put on a respirator, admitted to the hospital. My parents had to be called. My son, who my husband was in the process or adopting, it just all exploded in my face. This
Mm.
private decision, this secret. It was
Mhm.
immediately not a secret for me. Everybody knew, everything was involved. My new marriage, my walk as a woman. And so that was the heart of my story. I started off with that abortion, moved into our marriage with abortion between us, did later become pregnant with another son, but I became very distraught, ashamed. Many women who've had past abortion will find that the next pregnancy either becomes what we call an atonement pregnancy, where you think it's going to fill in the gap for that lost aborted child, um,
Mhm.
and it does not, or it becomes a place of shame where you feel like you don't deserve to be a mom because of what you've done. So that hard journey lasted for 7 years, from the time
Mm.
of my abortion for 7 years until I surrendered my life to Christ, actually. And he immediately put me on a healing journey that led me into what has now become 35 years of ministry. That's a real tightly condensed version because I can take hours to tell all
Yeah.
the details and yeah.
And, you know, what you mentioned about the secret part of that, the abortion choice was your choice.
Mhm.
And in your head at the time, this was going to be a secret. And due to the reaction, it very quickly was not. I think that what is miscommunicated about abortion in general is that it's safe as a secret because really it never is safe as a secret.
Right. And it's becoming worse because I had my
Mhm.
abortion so many years ago, whatever the number is now, 40, 50 years ago,
Mm,
practically almost, because we've been
yeah.
married almost 50 years. The point is that at that point, it was a very new battle for women.
Mhm.
When I was published in Red Book magazine. You remember that magazine?
Yeah, I do.
And talking about a woman's right to choose. And so it was a new battle. It was a freedom battle. It was like, we deserve this. We deserve this opportunity. So over
Mhm.
those 50 years, first of all, many times I hear the same story of
Yes.
the same story told over and over all those years with women. However, today, the most prominent abortion is an over-the-counter abortion. It's an abortion that
Mhm.
you get at your front door in an Amazon bag. It's one that happens all alone in your own home. So,
Mm.
like, I had that experience in a hospital where doctors and nurses came running to my aid, and I was put on a respirator, and my parents were called. I had to have that abortion over again after that procedure when they announced to me parts of the fetus were left behind during the emergency. You had to have the abortion again. So now I'm so aware of the young woman who orders her
Mhm.
abortion online, who gets her abortion at her front door. And in the pamphlet of instruction, it says, after this and this happens, just flush, don't look. Oh my gosh, Courtney. First of all, every woman's going to look.
Yeah.
And honestly, how would a woman ever even know what has happened, even medically and physically, to her unborn child? All that to say that the trauma of women having abortion is not getting lessened, it's getting increased.
Yeah. Yeah, because whether it is in a hospital situation like you're explaining, or it's in the privacy of your bathroom, it doesn't change
Yeah,
the trauma. It
yeah.
doesn't change the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical toll that is taken on you. And I think in so many situations, Pat, women don't give it in all situations, the credit isn't given in the moment. You have no idea how this is going to affect you in 1 year, 5 years, 20 years, 30 years. There
Gosh,
are women living with this secret their whole lifetimes. There's some women that
every
never admit it.
every podcast or every teaching or training I get on where it's there the room is full of women
Mhm,
telling their stories that they have held secret for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And so
mhm.
when we talk about the trauma of those long decades, what's going on that we're discovering now is at least I knew I was in a medical environment with doctors involved and nurses involved. Women now are carrying the load 100% on their own,
Mhm,
unless they bring in a girlfriend or a mom or a best
mhm.
friend to sit with them, which we hear the stories of women who've had these people stand moms or girlfriends standing over them in the bathroom. So now all that intimacy is involved. It's just a hot mess that the devil has been using for decades and
Mhm,
continues to exponentially increase the pain and loss and shame involved in
mhm.
decision.
When we talk about it being a secret, you've written a Bible study called Surrendering the Secret, which is for post abortive women to find healing. What led you? Yeah, I love it so much. What led you to realizing your story, your healing needed to be shared with the world and that other women needed this healing? Because I'm going to put a little caveat in there. A lot of people's opinion of people who have experienced abortion is that was your choice. Shame on you. And you don't deserve healing because you chose this.
Even bigger than that to me, especially in the faith community,
Mm.
is that there are too many pastors, ministry leaders, pastoral counselors who put the past in this little bucket of God has forgiven that, forget that, move on,
Mm,
instead of encouraging women to walk through a healing process of acknowledging their loss. So
yeah.
the thing that prompted me, as I shared, my husband and I got married. Were in 7 years of distance and self destruction over our abortion that people did know about, but the word
Mhm.
was never said after that day. It was never
Mm,
spoken between my parents or between him and I. The shame that shrouds the whole environment is so huge. So we spent 7 years in a troubled marriage. And it was basically had no chance of survival until we tried counselors. We went through the whole process of trying to save our marriage because at this time we had my firstborn son, which my husband had adopted, and we had a child between us. And so we were trying to rescue this marriage that had no hope. We
yeah.
just had this unnamed pain and shame and anger between
Mhm.
us. He was angry at me for the decision. I was angry at him for not standing up for me. So we had all this going on. We had this unnamed pain.
Mm.
And even not even only unnamed, but unrecognized. If I was so convinced it was the right thing to do, it never occurred to me during this journey of our broken marriage. Well, this is what happened. And after 7 years, we were at the point of sitting with a calendar in front of us saying, "You'll have the kids this week, I'll have the kids this week." And
Mm.
he had come from a broken home, and that was just the bottom of the barrel for him to create another broken home for our
Mhm.
kids. So I did the only thing I know to do that hadn't been tried to this point. I started going to church.
Mm.
So I went to a little local church in my neighborhood, not so little, a church in my neighborhood, started taking our 2 boys because he refused to go. Our faith background, we both have been raised in what we, call Christian homes, where we believe that Jesus was born in the manger and then Santa Claus comes. And Jesus died on the cross, and then the Easter bunny comes.
He's
That was our faith level. And
Mhm.
so I started going to church with that faith level and took both of our sons, and both of them received Christ in their Sunday school classes. So they started this basically ministering to me about their faith journey. And then the next thing I knew, I was invited to teach a fifth grade Bible study, a fifth grade Sunday school class in my church as an unsaved, broken, abortion recovering, middle of divorce woman. That's how our churches, how desperate our churches can get for help.
Yeah.
So they invited me or asked me to teach this Sunday school class, and I began to learn the gospel through my teaching of that fifth grade.
Mm.
So I eventually went to a women's conference and surrendered my heart to the Lord. So when I surrendered my heart, I was embraced by a discipleship group of women, and I got closer and closer to them until a day came, and I shared in my book and in our video series that I shared my abortion story with a woman in my church. And
Mhm.
she did just the right thing that we as Christians and believers want to do when we hear this story. She just embraced me and she said, "Pat, I've never had an abortion, but I have a lot of other sin in my life, and
Yeah.
Jesus covers even abortion." So
Mm.
that when you ask the question, what started me towards writing and surrendering the secret, it was that faith journey of learning God's redeeming love, walking
Mhm.
with a Christian counselor through the healing journey, which she used basically the concept of post-traumatic stress syndrome. She used that series of healing process to walk with me and eventually
Mhm.
my husband through the healing journey. And I just became passionate about it. The more I learned, the more I realized that the church was not addressing this issue.
Mm.
Excuse me, they were not dealing with the pain and hurt of abortion. They were not talking about it from the podium. Women were not talking about it in their groups. So that's when I started. I opened a crisis pregnancy center in Tampa for women facing the abortion decision. And I wrote Surrendering the Secret during that journey to help women find healing from a past abortion. Because what I discovered is most of the volunteers who came to the pregnancy center to volunteer had an abortion in their past.
Yeah. The statistic is mind-blowing to me that 1 in 4 women
Mhm.
have experienced abortion.
Conservatively, the
Yeah.
political statistics do not match my world. My world is that close to half of the women of childbearing age have experienced a past abortion.
Mhm.
I would bet it to be closer to 50% based on my experience. So it's
And
right?
yeah, it is high, and it's one thing to know that God has forgiven you in your head.
Mhm.
It's another thing to know that God has forgiven you in your heart. But what about the woman who can honestly say, "I know I'm forgiven, Pat, by
Mhm.
God, but I can't forgive myself."
Yeah. We address that in Surrendering the Secret very directly. It's funny,
Mhm.
my husband and I just started watching the Chosen series. It's been how many years going on? We're so
Yeah.
far behind. But we kept thinking about it and never started it, but we've just started watching it. And the thing I love about it is the reality or the real people persona that we get of Jesus in that series.
Mhm.
I know
Mhm.
people have different opinions of it, whatever, but as we're watching it, just that who Jesus is or his personal love for us. So, what we teach and remind in Surrendering the Secret is we can never forgive ourselves for our sin. That
Mhm.
it's too big, it's too deep, it's too nasty, it's too broad. So what we remind our people, women going through Surrendering the Secret, is that Jesus died on the cross for all of our sin, and
Mhm.
abortion is included. We
Yeah.
cannot forgive ourselves. We have to surrender to his forgiveness and receive it for the very reason he died on the cross for us. So it's a process for some women because motherhood
Mhm.
is so intimate and personal, as you well
Yeah.
know. It's the
Yeah.
gift that God has given us as women to be moms. And we
Mm.
have a natural, instinctive love for our unborn child. Or if it's not a natural love, oh, yay, I'm going to be a mom, it's all kinds of emotions go with it, right? The minute
Yeah.
a woman discovers she's pregnant, the emotion and mental and spiritual and physical all jump in. So we just teach women as far as that goes. It's not going to be about forgiving yourself. It's going to be about walking a healing journey that's going to set you free. That so that
Mhm.
I can say today, I had an abortion when I was 23 years old. So
Mhm.
I am now set free from that abortion experience. And all I know now is that one day when I get to heaven, I'm going to meet my unborn child.
Mhm.
And God has forgiven me, and He's actually uses my story. Revelation 12:11 says, we overcome the enemy through the blood of Jesus, which is what we're talking about here, and the word of our testimony. So,
Yeah.
our testimony is what sets other people free and leads the
Mhm.
way to Jesus for them. So, He has taken my story and allowed me 35 years of full time ministry to help other women find freedom through the story of their abortion.
Why do you think women who have experienced past abortions, why do you think it is such a deep secret?
Shame, heartbreak, the political debate that goes on that seems this is the right side and this is the wrong side. Uh,
Mhm.
I think just the natural instinct that God's given us to become
Mhm.
moms. That natural instinct is a natural protective instinct. And it lasts. I know you've got kids filling your house. It doesn't go away at a certain age. It
Mhm.
remains with us as women, that protective instinct and that desire to protect and love your children. So I think it starts the minute we see that little positive sign. We decide to destroy that, get rid of it, or if it's put on us through parents or coaches or other people, it just brings a natural shame to our
Mhm.
hearts. And shame is started in the Garden of Eden as the number one way to separate us from God.
Mhm. Mhm. And it absolutely can. One of the things in surrendering the secret that I was able to experience. So my story, and I'm using this opportunity with you. And I told you that you were the safest person I felt that to be on my podcast, that I
Yeah.
could share my story as well. And you also know that this portion of my story has been reserved due to the age of my parents.
Mhm.
And so I'll just take a little moment to share a little bit with the listeners. In high school, I was in an abusive relationship and we did get pregnant, and under no circumstances was he going to allow us to have a child because he was a little bit older. That would have required him leaving college. And our choice was to have an abortion. At that point, there was no way I could disappoint my parents. I had always been a really good girl. I had made really good choices. And I, my parents had walked through some other things with other siblings that I knew were really hard and heartbreaking for them. And I could not add to that heartbreak. And so the easiest thing, he wasn't up for this. I wasn't wanting to break anybody's heart or let anybody down. And so it made sense. I was responsible for the decisions that I made. And so that was the decision that we made at a very young, unstable point in my life. Fast forward, and now I'm having other children. And you are so right in the shame that I carried into every subsequent birth after that. The moment I would find out that I was pregnant, I assumed in my little knowledge of, I knew a lot about God, but in my intimate relationship with God, I did not have at the time. And so I assumed that every single pregnancy, there would be something bad that would happen because of what I had chosen. I lived so many years, Pat, just waiting for the punishment because that's the religion that I was raised in. I was raised in a religion that taught me a lot about God, but it also taught me about mortal sin. And murder was a mortal sin. Abortion falls underneath that. So I spent so many years believing that no matter what I did, I would go to hell because a mortal sin is punishable by hell. And I will never forget sitting down with a priest well into my 20s, well into many other children, and finally confessing to him about the abortion and him looking at me and saying, "This is not a mortal sin. You are forgiven." But it was what you just said at the beginning of this conversation. You're forgiven. Let's put it in a box and you're
Mhm.
forgiven. And so I learned pretty early in that confession with that priest, that gave me the confirmation that no, actually, I am forgiven by God for this choice. Confirmation and healing were two totally separate things.
Yes. Very good word.
And it was not something I even knew I needed healing from. I just knew that every single time it came up in my spirit, I would ask for forgiveness again. Wait, do you still forgive me for that? And every time I had another baby, I just know that I would look at that child and I would think, did he or she look like this?
Mhm.
Does he or she forgive me?
Mhm.
And that began to grow a fear in me that he or she was in heaven upset with me and
Mhm.
angry with me and living this how could you life in heaven, which then created a fear that was so irrational. But I just want a listener to understand that secrets and the enemy can create irrational fears in you
Yes.
that are not created by God. And that fear was my parents, if they die before me, they're going to find out.
Mm.
I'm going to be exposed and they are going to be so disappointed. And I lived with that fear for so many years of, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? All of these until all knowing that I was forgiven. But it was all of these fears until I heard a podcast and I heard a woman talking about her abortion story. And I heard her say, I did a study called Surrendering the Secret. And that was when I was like, wait a minute, there's more to this healing journey that I have not even given credit to. And so 30 years, Pat, I lived with this secret. My husband knew, one other person knew, two people, Pat, 30 years, six children later, I finally sat down and I did Surrendering the Secret. The first time I did it by myself because I was on a iPad because I wasn't even willing to buy the book because I didn't want the book to be found in my home. And so I did the entire study, I want to say in a week. I could not stop
Wow.
going through this, because all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, that is what I have believed. That is what I have felt.
Mhm.
There were the post traumatic part of that that I never given voice to was given a voice. But here's where the world changed for me. It was when in the study you asked the question, where was Jesus?
Mm. Mhm.
And I never thought about it.
Yeah.
I never thought about it. I remember years ago, there was this movie that came out, a girl who worked in an abortion clinic. I don't remember the name of the movie. And the movie came out, and all of the ladies that I was in Bible study with at the time said, we've got to go see this movie. And we went, and I sat in a dark theater. And I really believed when the opening scene is an abortion. And I felt like, number one, I felt like I was going to vomit. Number two, I felt like somebody had shined a huge spotlight with a big arrow over my head saying, this is the one, this is the one. And I sat in a row of all Christian women who loved me dearly, who I loved dearly. We had prayed in so many intimate settings about so many things. And I sat in that movie theater and I thought, do they know? Will they realize that I'm the one
Yes.
that has been on the other side of this? And I just wept and wept. And that's when I knew also there was more healing that needed to be done. But that question of where was Jesus? And then
Mhm.
realizing he was in the room weeping with me.
Mhm.
He was the reason I survived.
Yeah,
Because I shouldn't have.
me too.
This was not some classy abortion clinic where they were taking really good care of a 16-year-old little girl.
God.
This was a dump.
Mhm.
And they were happy to escort me to that room and encourage me that all was going to be fine. And then when I got pregnant for my second son, I had a lot of infertility issues leading up to that pregnancy. And so I had one son, and then I really believed, I was like, okay, here's some infertility issues. This is the punishment. This is
Mhm.
the punishment. And it was constantly living a life looking over my shoulder of this is the punishment. And then when our oldest son began to battle with some of his choices and fell into addiction, that was the punishment.
Mhm.
And I could justify really anything that was happening bad in my life
Yeah.
as God's punishment.
Isn't it
To
amazing how that happens when you really weren't even consciously aware needing healing until you
right,
heard that radio show, but
right.
yet those thoughts kept popping up throughout your life.
Oh, absolutely. And this is punishment that I believe, but I fully now I've been saved. I am doing Bible studies. I am deep diving into scripture. I am teaching scripture. Like
Right.
you just said, you've got me teaching a Sunday school class and I am doing all of those things. But in the back of my head,
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for the axe to drop because you will be punished.
Mhm.
You will be punished. And when I did the surrendering the secret and I realized, actually, no, I'm not being punished. I am fully forgiven. The punishment left on the cross,
Yeah.
and God wants healing for this. It wasn't until I sat my family down
Mm.
and this secret was no longer a secret. That
Amen.
moment, Pat, is when healing truly
Yes.
happened.
The word of your testimony,
Yes,
the blood of Jesus, the healing that God did, the word of your testimony set you free.
yes, instantaneously. Like, I know people that are listening may be like, Courtney, I could never tell anyone. And guys, I believed that for a long time that I could never tell anyone. What
Yeah.
would people think of me? I have 6 children. I have a sister that had one child and then battled infertility for 10 plus years. The guilt that I felt over
Mhm.
the fact that I so flippantly got rid of a child. And then God was like, here are 6 more. I did not have any complications with any of my pregnancies. I had beautiful, healthy babies. And I really never even, it took so many years for me to look at that and realize that was God just saying, I forgive you,
You
and
I
and blessing me with more abundance in children that I could have even imagined, but still carried such guilt that there were other women out there that could not have children, that would have happily adopted that child if I couldn't raise it at such a young age or whatever. But it was an instant when I told my family, my children specifically, it was an instant healing. It was like the enemy was like, dang it,
Yeah.
I can't use that anymore.
Can't hold you with this anymore. Yeah.
And so I say all of that because, like you just said, it's so politicized. And you have this side saying pro life. And then you have this side saying, no, my body, my choice. But you know what I found so interesting is you have those that are 100% against abortion, agree with them. And then you have those that are like, no, let a woman choose to do what she wants with her body. But I feel like the silent majority who don't fit in either camp, because I can say all day long, I am pro life. Absolutely, today I am pro life. But the reality is, at one point in my life, I was not. Obviously, I made that decision. Just what you said.
Right. The truth is, we do have a choice. God says, I have set before you life and death. Choose life. But he states in that scripture, we have a choice. Women will always have a choice. Laws and politics will not ever stop this.
Friend, I want to thank you for listening with such tenderness and courage today. Whether abortion is part of your story or the story of someone you love, I pray that what you've heard today in this episode reminds you that you are not alone and that healing is possible. Today was raw and vulnerable. It was the first time for me to share my story, and I don't take this opportunity to share it with you, the listener, lightly. I'm grateful for Pat for creating a safe space and for her years of faithful ministry helping women find healing after abortion. But this isn't the end of the conversation. In next week's episode, part 2, we're going to go even deeper. Pat and I talk about how to take the first steps towards healing, how to know when it's time to share your story, how to walk with someone who's experienced abortion, and how the church can respond with compassion and truth. Pat also shares the scriptures that have anchored her, and we're going to close this episode with an in-depth prayer together. In the meantime, if you're ready to take the first step, I encourage you to visit surrenderingthesecret.com. You'll find the Bible study we mentioned, resources, and a way to connect with a trained leader near you. If this episode spoke to you, would you share it with someone who might need it too? You never know who is silently carrying this kind of pain. I'll meet you back here next week for part 2. Until then, know this: you are seen, you are loved, you are forgiven, and you are not beyond the reach of God's grace. Until next time. Thanks so much for listening to The Mom Show with Courtney Doyle. Remember to check the show notes for any links, books, or resources that are mentioned in each episode. We want to be sure this blesses other mothers, and in order to do this, if you're listening via podcast, be sure that you like and share. If you could write a review, that would be fantastic. It helps us get in front of other moms. If you're watching via YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. This way, you won't ever miss an episode. We want to make sure that we increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.